Before we get started, you know DomainTools.com, right? I can type whois.sc/domain name really fast, and I do it daily, but until recently, I didn't know how powerful their other tools were. If I want a domain name, I can set a free alert to notify me when it changes status. If it goes to auction, I can use their sales history tool to find comps and determine my maximum bid price. If I buy it and develop the domain name into a business, I can set up alerts for any domains registered that contain my trademark, and I can set up registrant alerts of all my competitors so I can keep an eye on what domains they're buying and know what they're up to before they make any announcements. DomainTools.com needs to be in your toolbox like it's in mine. Go sign up for an account on DomainTools.com today. My second sponsor is David E. Westlow at Wiley Rhine. Imagine having a legal issue like a UDRP or a cease and desist. Imagine having to get an agreement put together quickly for buying or selling a domain name. And imagine going to your family lawyer who just doesn't get it, or one of the expensive law firms in your city who are going to invoice you for thousands upon thousands of dollars. Then imagine going to David E. Westlow, who will understand your domain name portfolio and your intellectual property assets, understand the domain name environment, and be able to help you out quickly. David E. Westlow. I recommend him. I trust him. I suggest you give him a call. Your initial consultation is free. David E. Westlow at Wiley Rhine. Finally, our newest sponsor is Protrata, the domain exchange. Protrata is an amazing new platform for professional domainers and newcomers alike. Protrata makes trading domain names easy. With just a few clicks, you can analyze, bid, buy, and sell domains across all of the major marketplaces, including Namejet, GoDaddy, SnapNames, and Craigslist. You can also develop stagnating domains you own into great-looking, content-rich, socially active websites that will rank at Google and Bing. This tool is more comprehensive than any other I've seen. If you only use it for its 21 powerful buying filters, you'll get your money's worth. Get your free 14-day trial now at protrata.com. Protrada.com. Here's your program. Hey everyone, my name is Michael Seiger and I'm the publisher of DomainSherpa.com, the domain name authority and the place where you can learn how to become a successful domain name entrepreneur directly from the experts themselves. If you've ever worked with a really good professional recruiter, you know that the doors of opportunity are opened wider and more frequently than if you were to apply for jobs by yourself. Joining me today is Jason Davis. Jason is a professional recruiter turned domain investor and entrepreneur who focuses on the jobs and recruiting niche of domain names. Over the past 15 years, Jason has owned and developed one of the finest portfolios of job and recruiting domain names in the world. He bought recruiting.com for $75,000 in 2002. His wife called him crazy at the time, but 4 years later, he sold it to Jobster for a six-figure number. He also started recruitingblogs.com in 2007, and again, 4 years later, he sold it, this time in auction. We're going to learn how Jason makes smart buys, how focusing on a single niche helps him earn more, and how he gets top dollar for his job domain name sales. Jason, welcome to the show.
Hey, nice to be here.
Jason, I'd like to start the show with a little background on the guest, and then we'll move into what you do today that makes you successful as a domain name investor and entrepreneur. How did you first discover domain names?
So it was 1997, and I was a recruiter at the time. I just opened up my own recruiting firm, and I read an article in a newsletter, a recruiting newsletter called the Fordyce Letter, which is now owned by a good friend of mine. And somebody wrote into the forum section in this newsletter saying, you know, I'm a recruiter. What's a good domain name? And the guy wrote back saying, well, if you play software engineers, softwarejobs.com would be a good domain name. And I don't know what happened, but, you know, the bells start ringing in my head, and I'd never thought of domain names before. So I ran up to my computer and did a search for hardwarejobs.com because I placed engineers in the hardware industry, and Hardware Jobs was available. So I registered, and then And then I did a search for wirelessjobs.com, and that as well was available. And then I did a search for siliconvalleyjobs.com, and that was available, and on and on and on and on and on. And the interesting thing, and I really didn't think about it too much back then, but it would just ask you, do you want to, pay by check, via invoice or something? And I said, yeah. So I started registering all of these names, and I didn't have to pay for them until the mailman came.
Right.
2 weeks later, a month later, 3 months later, with a stack of network solution. Each one was $70 because you had to. It was $35 a year,
right,
and you had to pay 2 years in advance. And
so do you remember who that person was back in 1997 that wrote into the newsletter that was, it sounds like, published in print that you read that now opened up the whole world of domain names to you? Do you remember who that person was?
I don't, but I can find it. I mean,
yeah.
It was. I can. It was in 1997, so
that's
I can
amazing.
Go back.
So that person really had a lot of vision for what domain names were going to become, and really opened up a whole world to you.
Yeah, and I started buying domain names, and I never really stopped. At one point, I had, I don't know, maybe. I mean, I've never been one of those guys who had thousands and thousands. I had about maybe 600 of them, but I loved every single one of them.
Yeah.
And, but it was hard for me. It was hard for me to track them all, and right. I know I lost some.
That's a funny point that you bring up, Jason. So I was reading on your blog when I was doing my research, and you wrote a blog post in August of 2011, just recently, that made me laugh out loud, which is really awkward because I was sitting in a coffee shop doing the research. The title of your post was, "Have you done this?" And the post read, "I saw a name on Sedo just now that I liked. I was going to make an offer on it and thought I'd see what other domain names the guy owned. I clicked the link to see, and it turns out I already own the domain name."
Yeah, that happens to me. It happens often. And there was a time once where I actually bought a name for, I think it was $8,000 or $8,500, and it struck me about 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks afterwards, that I was the original owner of that domain name. And then somehow through my lack of organization, I lost it, and I bought it back.
Oh.
And then that happened again with a domain name I had that I bought for $1,800, and then I forgot to renew it, and then I ended up having to buy it back for $2,800.
Ouch!
But I just sold it about a month ago for $20,000.
So you recouped your losses pretty well.
I recouped my losses, but it was a good domain name. I wanted it. I knew it was.
Yeah.
It was
so how many domain names do you own today, and in what TLDs do they shake out?
Okay, so I own about 160 of them today. Almost all of them are in GoDaddy, so it's easy for me to track. And then I've got a couple elsewhere.
So one of the things that you did was you put all your domain names at GoDaddy, so you're less likely to forget to renew them if you don't get an email or.
Yeah, exactly. So they're all .coms with the exception of right now, maybe two or three, which are .nets, and that's it.
Yeah. Okay. And if you had to give up all your domain names except for 3 of them, do you know which 3 you would keep and why?
Well, I would keep slouch.com because I like it, and we can talk a bit about it later. I'm building out a business on that, so I would keep that. It's fun. When I sold recruiting.com, that was the only one-word domain name that I had, and I sort of, wanted another one-word domain name, so I scoured the planet for months until I found one that was cheap, that was really cheap.
Yeah.
And I found it was on Great Domains, slouch.com. And I think they were asking $10,000, and I think I paid $4,800 for it. So I was happy with it.
Yeah.
So I would keep slouch.com. I would probably keep directorjobs.com. I don't know. Three is tough, but I know if that's my choice. I don't really know. Let me think about it.
That's okay. And so why would you keep director jobs? Is that like directors for movies? Is that what you mean?
Well, no, there's a lot of people who do searches for director related
Oh,
jobs.
the status, like
Yeah,
VP, director, manager.
yeah,
I
yeah,
gotcha.
yeah. There's a lot of people who do searches for that, and I don't really know from an AdSense or a cost per click or anything like that. I mean, I've never really paid too much attention to it, and I've never bought. Originally, I never bought domain names thinking that's what I was going to do on it. I was watching that interview you did with Rick Schwartz, which was fascinating, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
And he had this domain name, and then he slapped some logos on, and he's making $200 a day. Like that stuff was so foreign to me. I bought names that I thought I could either run a business on for my recruiting firm.
Right.
So when I bought videojobs.com, I wasn't thinking, corporations can video themselves talking about the job, or a candidate can put a video resume of themselves telling you why they want the job. These were all categories that the engineers that I was recruiting worked in. So, audio jobs, I don't own it anymore. I sold it, but audio jobs, video jobs, DSP jobs, Silicon Valley, startupjobs.com. That was a great sale as well. I don't own it anymore. I sold it a couple months ago.
What did you sell that one for?
Again, like mid five figures.
Okay. Somewhere in the 50,000 range, somewhere around there.
Yeah. The guy who bought that from me, his name's Harry Joyner. He's a good friend of mine, and so he bought. What did he buy from me? He bought startupjobs.com from me, and he bought
CEOjobs.com.
CEOjobs.com. Yeah.
Yeah. All
So
right.
these
And I'm going to bring
these-
him up because I want to ask you about unique deals that you've done, and one involves Harry.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So I read online that the most you've sold a domain name, just the domain name for, was $95,000. Is that statement true?
Yeah, that's true. There was a little social network attached to it, but that domain name was I sold that for 95,000.
Do you remember what that domain was?
Wireless jobs.
Wireless Jobs. Excellent.
.com, yeah.
Was that one that you hand registered back in the 97 time period?
All these names were hand registered.
Wow.
And I just learned about that term. I used to call it, I was the original owner. I didn't know that hand registered was the term. So
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll
Excellent.
remember to use that, but yeah, I was the original hand, whatever it's called.
Hand register,
Hand-
register. I don't
Yeah.
know. Okay, so you started off in recruiting. You started your professional career in recruiting. I want to go back in time, ask you a few questions about recruiting, because I think there's a lot of similarities between recruiting and domain name investing, buying, selling, trading. That I think the audience will get a lot of benefit from your knowledge on. So you started recruiting at your mom's recruiting firm. You were telling me just before the show.
Well, no, it wasn't her firm. She worked at a firm, and I went to work there.
Okay. At the place where your mom did recruiting.
Right.
And so what type of professionals did you focus on placing at first?
They were electrical engineers, hardware design engineers, and guys who were designing and developing integrated circuits.
Okay.
So doing digital circuit design or analog design, or something that's called mixed signal, which is a mix of both analog and digital.
Right. And this is the time frame when we were leading up to the dot-com boom, and probably a lot of these hardware engineers were making good salary at the time.
Yeah, so I started in